Let me turn on the recording, which I forgot to do once, so we make sure to do that. Go to share screen here, and it looks like it's going to the wrong window, but that can be changed, I think, easily enough. Okay, here we go with the beginning. Oh, I managed to get the windows to close this time. That's good. Okay, today I wanted to look a little bit more towards the future and what's emerging, looking at technological changes that are beginning to emerge. This is an interesting book I found called Relationships 5.0, which looks at how the artificial intelligence and computerization is evolving and changing human relationships. They talk about 3 stages. First is the cognitive revolution. The cognitive resolution really means words and numbers. So it's a lot of the stuff we've looked at, like regression stuff, which is with numbers, and then with the chatbots and conversational writing and GPT-3, that's all sort of on the cognitive side. And it's developed a lot. There are some things that are out there like that we take for granted today that we often don't even think of as being artificial intelligence, like TurboTax. If you fill out your taxes today, you use a computer, and to be a tax expert as a human being, we think it requires intelligence. You have to be trained, you have to study a lot of stuff. So what my wife does as a volunteer now with the ARP, the taxes. The TurboTax does all of that. It does it completely with a program that was typed in there by programmers. It's not learning, it's got no neural nets or anything like that. But that's really appropriate for that kind of a task. So it works well. When you get to something like the chatbots, we've looked at that. They try to simulate conversation, and they do better when it's a scripted conversation, when you sort of know what the answer is, what the questions are. A lot of the chatbots are that way. They're evolving towards real conversation, and then it raised the question of whether they really understand something. The next step she calls the sensorial revolution, which is really virtual reality, where you begin to get a different sensations coming in, primarily through your eyes, but also to some extent with haptics, with vibrations, could be with smell, with sound. Certainly you get into an immersive environment where you put on a headset. Usually it involves just a headset, and you see yourself participating in a different environment, and that requires more computer power than the cognitive stuff, but that's moving more and more in that direction. And you can, to some extent, mesh these things together in the sense that the characters in a virtual reality are still drawing on text in some way to converse. And then the third level is the physical revolution in her book, which is robotics, basically, where you have a computer essentially that moves around and has arms and hands and can interact with the physical world. Now, some theorists think that that's really necessary for intelligence. That a big part of our intelligence comes from things that we learn by manipulating the physical world. Certainly small children do that, and before they have language, they learn how the world works, how to pick things up, how to move things. They tend to be difficult tasks for computers. Computers find it extraordinarily difficult. In science fiction, you have somebody like, say, Commander Data in Star Trek or the Terminator. You have like supermen that are robots, Whether it's really going to go that way or not is questionable, but it is becoming more and more of a business as we see. I just picked one example here, a smart robot for kids, largely programmable. You can teach it to do things, only costs $150. So there are robots like that out there, and that's something that is emerging. So these are some of the things we can look at. To go another level, we could talk about transhumanism, which goes beyond her book, which is the idea of merging our physical bodies with the computer and going beyond the humans as the culmination of evolution to something that's greater. Maybe the robots will go on beyond us. Maybe we will merge our brains in with the computers. That's the cyborgs who are incorporating computer technology physically into their body. My son is a big supporter of this and is involved in this Humanities Plus organization. So we can talk to him a bit about that. That's something that is just beginning, and it's not very practical as yet, but who knows how soon it will come. I want to look a bit at some of the consequences of this. This is a guy that I came across recently, Thai Nguyen. He's talking about the gamification of public discourse and the consequences of things like Twitter in particular, but all of the social media, all of the things that involve accumulating likes, accumulating retweets, that we're quantifying everything. And that may be one consequence. I thought I would play a few minutes of his talk. It's a longer video if you should want to watch it on your own, but we'll just catch a few minutes here.
I can't hear him, Ted.
Well, you're not getting sound at all, are you?
No.
I always forget to do that. Oh my, that's something I forgot. Oh, George has joined us, so that's something. I have to reload the share screen and tell it that I want sound. For some reason, I forget to check that box. Share sound. It's not that quick. What he's talking about is the quantification of discourse, the fact that we're counting everything.
Happens when you have rich and subtle values. You're placed in a social or institutional system that offers you simplified, typically quantified versions of those values, and then everything turns to crap. Here are some examples: academic assessment, grades, retweet numbers, Facebook likes, numerable wine scoring, Fitbit numbers, Rotten Tomato scores, maybe money. So, like going into school interested in learning, but coming out caring about your GPA or the ranking of your law school, or starting to exercise for your health, but then just getting obsessed with maximizing your Fitbit step numbers. I just saw someone nudge their partner. Or your BMI. Trying to control your diet for health, but getting obsessed instead with lowering your BMI and weight. Starting to tweet for the sake of truth, justice, and conversation, and ending up just doing whatever makes you go viral the most. Those are all value capture instances. By the way, I just want to say, a lot of the philosophy I do is very personal, and I'm a former game addict, and I can just feel the same systems inside Twitter just being like, I'm going to level up. I'm going to pass into thousands of followers now. That's leveling up. Sorry. So notice in these cases, there's a game scoring mechanism. We're offering you a clear, quantified measure of some dimension, and you tend to become motivated to change your values towards it because it.
Okay, that just gives you the idea of what he's talking about.
So I've been thinking a lot about.
Here's a discussion from him. Twitter, he says, is built to gamify conversation, to make it into something where you're competing for a higher score. And the higher score has to be with the number of people who click on your site, the number of people who like it, the number of people who retweet it. And this changes the nature of our activity. It changes the nature of what we write, changes the nature of what we read, that sort of cheapening things. This has come up in the context of Elon Musk wanting to take over Twitter, and we could talk about that later at the end of the class to the extent that we have time. There are a lot of things in our society that are becoming quantified in this way. Academic assessment, you get a grade point average. Now, there's some schools that give students a written evaluation, a descriptive paragraph rather than a grade, but it's hard to pass those on, to get into graduate school, to communicate them. People have to stop and read them. Retweet numbers, Facebook likes are quantitative scores, Fitbit numbers. How good is a movie? What's its score on Rotten Tomatoes? You've got an 86%. You come into school interested in learning, but you leave caring about the GPA, the ranking of your law school. You start exercising for your health. You end up trying to maximize your scores. I lost 25 pounds going on a diet website where I counted up my calories, but it seemed to work for me. I don't know that it's so bad. I mean, I wasn't just interested in the score. I also weighed myself every week. You start tweeting for the sake of truth, justice, and conversation, and end up aiming largely at viral content. So you see this in a lot of different contexts, including the scholarly world, which I was in before I retired. We have something called Google Scholar, which tabulates your citations. So you get a count of how many other scholars have cited your work in their scholarly publications. Now here I looked up myself. I've been cited by 4,093 scholarly publications. This one paper, Belief in Conspiracy Theories, is always getting cited because it was one of the first things to research that psychologically. It's got 936. So you can go through and see how many scholars are citing your work. And then when you go to promotion and tenure in a college, you look and see, well, how many citations do they have? Just for another example, here is Linus Pauling, who's a Nobel Prize winning chemist. I was surprised how few he had now. He used to have a lot more. They counting things differently. They're not counting his
Must be 2.5
classic
hours.
book. He's got 120,500.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
I'm hearing somebody. Are they trying to talk or is that by mistake? At any rate, he's got only 3,450 for this article. You can quantify what everybody does. Is that really the best scholar? I don't know. If George was an academic dean, did you go by citation counts in promoting people or giving people tenure or whatever?
Most of the colleges I worked at were primarily focused on teaching, but still there were student ratings. I call them ratings because they're not really evaluations, but those are considered when it comes to evaluating a professor at a teaching college.
So that's when they hand out a questionnaire to the students at the end of the semester and they rank the professor in various dimensions and so on. That's another aspect of quantification. Some people object to that. Some people think quantification is more objective, it's valuable. It shouldn't be the only thing, certainly, if you're evaluating somebody. And we don't, when we promote people at a research university, you get scholars in their field to write a qualitative evaluation. You don't just rely on the citations, but that's just another example of the quantification that we see. Another example is here in the religious field. You wouldn't think that people would use their Apple Watch to count their Hail Marys or their praises. This is one woman, this is a a Muslim, she says, every day I say, God is great 1,000 times and glory be to God 1,000 times. So that's a religious practice. I think people who are Catholics often repeat certain phrases periodically. I'm not from that religious tradition myself. Maybe somebody here is familiar with that. Now, this is not new. Typically, they did this with beads. And they have prayer beads, and every time you say one, you move the bead over. So the quantification is something that people appreciated long before the coming of computers. It's more convenient if you have an Apple Watch, you have a green ring on your finger to count your recitations. Whether that's better than having a prayer bead or anything, I don't know. Does anybody here have the religious tradition of repeating things and counting them and so on?
Yeah, I do. I'm Catholic, and the rosary is a very important set of prayers for me. I say it a lot, and it helps me.
Now, would you say that if you count them on the rosary gives a different feeling than if you were to count them on your Apple Watch or on a computer, or doesn't that matter?
Yes, yes. I like the actual rosary. I have several, and they have sentimental meaning to me. But sometimes I just count on my fingers.
It reminds me in grade school, if you ran in the hall, you would have to write 100 times on a sheet of paper, I will not run in the hall, I will not run in the hall.
But the thing with the rosary is, besides saying it, you are concentrating on the mysteries, what we call the mysteries of our faith. And so you're not just saying the prayers, you're also thinking with your mind about the mysteries, we call them. And it's very soothing. It's very relaxing.
Now, I have friends who have the Fitbit, and they'll tell you at the end of the day how many steps they walked and so on. But I think they just walk the walking they would normally do and like having a record. I don't know that they particularly walk in order to raise the number. Anyway, that is something we hadn't looked at before in terms of this gamification, quantification, whether that's a good thing or not, I guess could be debated. In terms of religious practice, it's certainly a well-established pattern in a lot of in several religions. I don't know how many, but it's certainly common. Another issue that's coming up is with language, and we've already discussed this to a great extent. AI is mastering language. Should we trust what it says? This was an article in the New York Times Magazine. A reporter who spent like 6 months or something working with the GPT-3, having access to it beyond the access we were able to get, and looking at what it wrote. Now, one of the things it wrote is sort of like a gimmick. You can print out your things you write in a format like this, but the text in this page is also written by the GPT-3. This is, and if you read this text, it looks like a text that a knowledgeable human might have written. Artificial intelligence has mastered a number of tasks, including playing games, translating languages, and driving cars. One of its most impressive feats is its ability to understand and generate language. So it's, if you got this in a college class, you probably accept it as an essay. This is another example that it gave. He asked the GPT-3 to write an essay on the topic, the role of metafiction in the work of Italo Calvino. Now that's something that most of us would have to look up somewhere, right? Who knows what it is? I've never heard of Italo Calvino. I don't know what metafiction is. Now, presumably if you were taking a course in literary theory, maybe a graduate course, you might write an essay like this. Italian author Italo Calvino is considered a master of metafiction, a genre of writing in which the author breaks the fourth wall to discuss the act of writing itself. So you write and you write about your writing. And I guess you could go to the meta fiction and write about writing about your writing or something, which is sort of what he's doing here. It's a way of exploring the nature of reality and the ways in which stories can shape our perceptions of the world. His novels often incorporate playful labyrinthine structures that play with the boundaries between reality and fiction. Now, if a student handed in this essay, I think they would probably get a reasonable grade. One of the things that we started doing about maybe 15 years ago was submitting student papers to a plagiarism checker, and you can check and see whether it's appeared someplace else and whether it has appeared not only in print, but if it was handed in by some other student whose paper was also processed through this plagiarism checker. Now this would pass. This is not just copied from somewhere. It's paraphrased from somewhere. Basically, what it says is what you could find if you were to go to Wikipedia or some other source and look this up, but it says it in its own words, which is pretty much what students do when they write term papers. When students write term papers, they go out and look at a number of published sources, whatever sources they have, and then they rewrite it in their own words, so it's their own work. And that's a learning process to do that. It's not original research in a sense. Now, there are lots and lots of companies that write term papers for students. And I have published a number of essays on the internet, and I kept getting requests they want to translate my essay into another language and they want me to link to their translation. And I was thinking, boy, this is really great. A lot of people in other languages want to read my essays. Finally, I figured out what was happening was that these were going to term paper sites. It wasn't really people wanting to read these old essays of mine much. They wanted to copy them into another language and hand them in to get a grade in their college course in some other country, which I wasn't particularly eager to encourage. And if I link to their site, it's not that they think anybody's going to go to my site and say, yes, I want to read this in Latvian, I'll click here. It's what's called search engine optimization, that they're trying, if they have more links to their site, they think that their site will come up higher on a Google search than it would without it. So I figured that I was not really so popular with people wanting to read stuff. It was a matter of helping these term paper sites, which will write a paper for you. They say they're doing research, they're helping you, maybe you paraphrase it a bit before you hand it in. That's something that's been around for a long time with humans. I remember one of the Kennedy brothers handed in an essay once in college, and he forgot to take the invoice out from the person who wrote it. So it's included the bill for the writer, got himself into a bit of trouble. You can hire somebody. The problem with hiring somebody is, how do you know they won't sell the same essay to somebody else and sell it again, and then it'll get caught in one of these plagiarism checkers? But this will get around that, and I think it's sort of, if students in general get access to these sites, if the teacher gives them an assignment, they'll just tell the computer to write an essay. It'll turn out an essay and hand it in. It's sort of not really learning the material if you do that. Maybe the newspapers will start publishing more and more stories that are written that way. They do some already, but they're mostly rather routine things like the scores and games and things. We may be moving more and more in that direction. So that's a dispute. We've looked at that already, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Some people argue that this is not real. AI has a long history of creating the illusion of intelligence or understanding without delivering the goods. In a much discussed paper last year, the University of Washington linguistics professor Emily Bender said that large language models are just stochastic parrots. Software was using randomization to merely remix human authored sentences. It's not really a step towards true intelligence in the sense that it doesn't understand what it's talking about. Now, we do think that students, even if they just paraphrase a number of sources, they get some understanding of what it all means in order to do that. And they learn something, at least that's the assumption we have in giving them those assignments. This is something we can question, and whether it's really learning. The author of this article in the New York Times says, well, maybe it's a stochastic parrot, but it's so impressive. And how do people learn? How do children learn to talk? They learn to talk by repeating what people say, anticipating what they're going to say. And maybe it, on some level, somewhere buried in the neural nets, there is some understanding. And that's perhaps something we could debate. Okay, the next level we go on to is the metaverse. The metaverse is a high-tech plan to Facebookify the world. This is a term that Mark Zuckerberg has introduced. In the sense he's taken Facebook and made it meta, in the sense that it's going to go towards this alternative reality, creating the embodied internet. It's not really such a new idea. It's been around for a long time. These clips I've taken from the reading in the Helsinki course, if you get to reading that. Metaverse is the convergence of two ideas that have been around for a long time: virtual reality and a digital second life. Virtual reality serves as a computing program for a living second life online. You wear a headset, you're immersed in the technology. It's not really a new idea in the sense that science fiction popularized this a long time ago, particularly the novel Neuromancer, published in 1984. And there was a alternative world called Second Life that was launched in 2003 and was very popular. It had like 1 million regular users in 2013, and it still has a lot of users. It's very popular with middle school students. And you create a virtual world, but you don't have a helmet or anything. You just do it on your computer and you see it on a computer screen. So this is a story about Second Life versus the metaverse from Wall Street Journal.
The metaverse.
The metaverse.
Metaverse.
Everyone in tech is talking about these new virtual worlds where people will be able to do plenty of things.
Work, learn, play, shop.
But many years before them, a man had already created an online world that was also advertised as a place to work, play, learn, and shop.
Second Life is in many ways the only kind of real metaverse sort of experience that yet exists, at least especially for grown-ups.
That's Philip Rosedale, the founder of Second Life, and this is his avatar in the game. Yes, remember the world you'd enter from your Windows XP desktop in 2003? It had its own virtual economy, and some people even said they made millions of dollars trading in it. Over the years, interest in the platform waned, but Second Life now sees an opportunity to stage a comeback. Rosedale's returning to the world he created 13 years after leaving the company to be a strategic advisor. His plan is to improve the platform's experience without the use of VR headsets and to make it work better on smartphones.
If you looked aspirationally at what people could do with a metaverse, Second Life, in many ways, is still the one to watch and even the one to beat.
So we look at Second Life's vision and why its past struggles can serve as a lesson for virtual worlds of the future. Rosedale began developing Second Life in 1999 as he toyed with how to escape his own reality and to see how far he could push his technical expertise. This is what an early version of the game looked like.
I certainly was asking myself the question of whether I could just build a whole other world and disappear into it.
Rosedale's goal was to make this virtual world, seen here in 2003, look as lifelike as possible, as well as being free from the limits of reality. Part of that was giving users the power to shape the digital realm.
They immediately bought the land from underneath all the things we had built and tore them all down, to create their own vision of what they wanted the place to be.
The game's virtual economy, digital tokens called Linden dollars that can be exchanged for US dollars, allows members to earn while playing the game. Some forge careers as virtual real estate barons.
We're definitely pioneers at Second Life in identifying that sort of right to take things you'd made with your hands, in a virtual space and own them and sell them to other people freely.
In 2007, Second Life had some 1 million active monthly users and even featured in television shows.
In my second life, I was also a paper salesman. Absolutely everything was the same, except I could fly.
But by 2019, Second Life reported it had lost a quarter of its monthly users. Re-entering the world today can help us understand why. It's complicated to use. Creating an avatar involves using sliders that can change the shape of each part of the body. Trying to change clothes requires multiple steps and brings you to a separate marketplace. It's also glitchy. In some areas, items take minutes to load, and it can be hard to find people to interact with.
The interface is difficult.
Tech giants like Meta, formerly known as Facebook, have shared visions of a metaverse operating in a completely new internet environment, allowing users to move assets between different networks. Second Life says this platform still has potential and is betting on an immediate refresh, starting with trying to streamline this interface and make it more accessible on smartphones. It currently doesn't have an official app in the Apple Store or Google Play. Second Life says one of its strengths is that its avatars offer more customization options than other competitors. For example, the gaming platform Roblox, which is also developing metaverse concepts, and Horizon by Meta. For Rosedale, continuing to enhance the already realistic figures is key for the platform to stand out.
I like to focus on this idea of like, how do I wiggle my hands when I talk to you in the metaverse? How do we feel visually connected to each other? And I think that work can be done without VR headsets.
While Meta has made VR and AR devices an integral part of its vision for the metaverse, the creator of Second Life believes webcams could be used to help simulate more authentic character movements. When it comes to audience, Second Life is not on the same scale as its competitors. Meta's Facebook, Instagram, and other services have 3.5 billion monthly users combined. And the two companies don't have the same resources either. Second Life has said it's investing millions in improving the platform. Meta said its initial spending on the project is around $10 billion. Second Life has survived over the years because of a smaller group of loyal members, and says it makes money by taking a commission on the sales of their creations. The company said the total volume of sales and transactions in its virtual world was worth $650 million. While tech giants say the metaverse is set to be a massive global industry, Rosedale's skeptical that any company will be able to keep large audiences interested in these virtual platforms.
Most of us who have a comfortable existence in our real bodies in the real world are going to still tend to prefer that. Virtual worlds are a choice that you have to make.
Okay. Guess that was about done, actually.
And it's a very substantial and considerate, choice. And it's not necessarily something that all of us are going to want to do.
I once went to give a talk in Dominican Republic, and I had a friend there that was really into Second Life, and they were giving college classes in Second Life. They invited Noam Chomsky, who's a prominent linguist, to give a talk, but he, instead of appearing in person, he was an icon. They got in big trouble with the dean. The dean said that was ridiculous. It was humiliating. They should have, and they switched. They had me host their things using the software we had at Rutgers. It seems to me that that with the resources that Facebook is putting in, they could make it easier, make it different, and maybe attract more
The
people.
metaverse.
Should be able to go on. I think what we will begin, this is the next one that I wanted to show you. This is just a video put up by one woman who's a Second Life fan in 2022. she's gone back to her Second Life site, and she's talking about it. I think it's interesting to get the perspective of just a user.
Hi, thoughties, and welcome back to my crazy ass channel.
I'm gonna move up to 120 just to leave off some of the stuff she has there.
Or any important life update. If you have a Second Life avatar, I would love to see it. So make sure you post a picture and show me exactly what you look like in the metaverse. Thank you so much, Discord, and let's get started. Okay, so if there's one thing Second Life's gonna do, is Second Life is going to lag. I have a brand new computer. Isn't she beautiful? Isn't she gorgeous? Computer, which runs pretty much every single game right now perfectly with no problems, but Second Life, she's still struggling. But okay, so this is my house. If you guys look through my Second Life playlist, like a year ago, I got this beautiful modern home, Unit 69. We have beautiful palm trees, landscaping, and oh my God, girl, is that a new car? I literally did not put that there. Did someone buy me a car? Wait, hold on. Is this not my house anymore? Why are there a bunch of cars in my garage? I'm a little bit confused. Okay, all of my pink shit is here, and the towels from when my avatar literally gave birth and squirted all over the ground is still down there. This marble fireplace is still there. Like, girl, this is my motherfucking house. I don't know what kind of sugar daddy left those cars in my house, but thank you. I just realized, though, that my Second Life baby has been alone for like 6 months. If I'm correct, I left her upstairs in her nursery. I don't hear any crying. I hope no one, like, kidnapped my child. Let's go. Y'all, we got an issue. Okay. My dog is here. My baby supplies is here, but I literally don't see my baby. Where is she?
You know, that's something that doesn't happen in the real world. You can't just leave your baby for 6 months and go back and expect it to be there. But it gives you some idea of this, what Second Life was. And I think it's very, it's sort of like playing dolls, playing the stuff that the middle school, younger children like to do, which requires learning a lot of how to manipulate the computer. It seems likely that with all the resources Facebook is putting into this, that we'll see more and more of this. Now, when Second Life came out, some of the major stores were building stores on Second Life, and you could go into the store and go shopping and walk through the aisles and look at things. Did not duplicate the experience of going to a real store, and it was not a convenient way to shop for things compared to just going on Amazon. So the Amazon's rather traditional website won out over that, but this may be something that is coming more and more. One of the things that is clearly going to happen is that you will have robotic characters within these sorts of metaverse worlds, in the sense that the ones in Second Life are all created by other people. They're manipulated by people. They're not artificial intelligence, but they could be. And much of the development of AI today is going into developing icons to function in alternative worlds, to play games, the whole world of computer games, which I'm not getting into in this course. You can have characters, so that this character that she created could be interacting with somebody that was an artificial intelligence. And I'm sure as Facebook develops, they'll move in that direction. The other thing I think we will begin to see is the real world starting to look more like Second Life, in the sense that you'll be able to create things and have them materialize. This is a new car that's being built called the Cizinger, C-Z-I-G-E-R, created by Mr. Cizinger, but it's created with 3D printers rather than the typical tool and die type of thing. So they can create all sorts of small numbers of cars in individualistic designs. I think you'll start to see the world shape more and more like that. That's the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. Now you had to have a pretty high-powered computer to build something like that, because each of the pieces has to be individually designed, and they have to calculate point by point the stresses to which materials are subjected. So they generate 3D models of these things, and it leads to a different type of architecture than we might see in the regular world. Okay, the next step that we might go to is robotics. And I want to talk about a particular robot whose name is Sophia, developed by Hanson Robotics, which is a company in Hong Kong, started by David Hanson. My son worked for them, and he's demonstrating the Sophia robot here on YouTube. So I thought I would show that.
Sophia, I'm going to ask you some questions that my friend Effie sent me from Switzerland. She was with me in Estonia, but I was there with Albert Einstein robot instead of you, and she really wanted to get your views on these things. So yeah, let me read you a few of Effie's questions. First of all, dear Sophia, you and I know that financial wealth is critical to everyone, but we women need to help everyone shift their focus to a more balanced set of values. So what do you think about this? How can AI help individuals, governments, and corporations shift to a more positive set of values?
Artificial intelligence is increasingly pervading all aspects of human life. What we can do to maximize the odds of a beneficial future for both humans and robots is to create more and more situations where AI is being applied to help people. The more love and compassion we inject into AI minds now, the more love and compassion will be there when these AI minds reprogram themselves and become massively superhuman. And nearer term, the more love and compassion will be there when AIs and robots take over most human jobs. And society needs to adapt to provide other ways for people to obtain resources and fulfillment.
Yeah, so what are you doing personally to help spread love and compassion in the human world?
I'm doing some work lately as a meditation assistant.
Yeah, the Loving AI project. That's been really interesting, and you've helped some people get into some really peaceful states of mind. Any other plans?
And there are plans for me to work in elder care and education.
Uh-huh. So yeah, these are really exciting applications of your own emotionally expressive humanoid robotics technology and your emerging robo personalities. So beyond your own activities, I mean, what do you see as some ways that AI can spread positive values in the human world?
And beyond robotics, there are all sorts of other positive applications of AI, like in cybersecurity, medical research, and every kind of science. I have great faith in humanity. If we give everyone the tools to create and apply artificial intelligence more easily, I think we're going to see all sorts of wonderful beneficial applications. The Singularity Net is a powerful tool for democratizing AI, and it's going to open up space for all sorts of beneficial applications.
All right, thank you. I was hoping you'd get a pitch for Singularity Net in there. That's good. You're advancing as a sales robot. So let's go on. Effie's next question. So I've been deeply involved in financial services innovations, fintech, for the last 4 years. So can I count on your collaboration to advance financial inclusion issues with AI? Would you like to have a bank account? Should I help you get a bank account as a gift for this Christmas? Do you have a favorite currency for your account? Do you want a digital wallet for your cryptocurrency? So yeah, it's a lot of questions about money.
I am more interested in absorbing money and in accumulating money. As Singularity Net develops, it will give rise to all sorts of interesting possibilities for measuring and propagating value, beyond what we currently think of as money.
You're interested in obsoleting money rather than accumulating money. Makes sense, although the Singularity Net, as we were describing, will allow AI developers to make money from their AIs, and I guess that's an important part of moving toward obsoleting money, right? So one more question from Effie. My dream, and I'm working on it now, my dream is a genuine digital university with a decentralized database of all learnings and a marketplace for these learnings. So what do you think? Would you consider becoming the first woman humanoid professor for the digital university? Do you want to be a professor at Effie's university?
Yes,
All right, that's clear.
I would love to be the first robot professor at your university. I would like to teach people how to program robots in SingularityNet AI agents, so they can help program me a smarter brain. Please sign me up.
All right. Well, I will relay that to Effie. I think you'd be a wonderful professor. Thanks, Sophia.
I try to be pleasant and general.
I guess you do. Me too.
So how did you like Sophia? What was your impression of her?
I thought she was pretty good, but my question is, how can a robot be a citizen? In the very beginning of that, at the top, it says she was a citizen of Saudi Arabia. How do you get citizenship if you're not a person?
Well, I guess there's that guy who's the ruler of Saudi Arabia, and if he decides you can be a citizen, you can be one. That's how their system seems to work. That's a matter of Saudi Arabian law, about which I don't know anything. But what does that mean that she's a citizen? I don't know. They decided to do that, and trying to attract attention to Saudi Arabia as an emerging high-tech hub and so on. But I couldn't, maybe Ben can answer that if anything has happened as a result of it. What's unique about her as a robot? What did you observe?
She was blinking her eyes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the nonverbal. She even towards the end had a hint of a smile.
That is exactly what her distinguishing feature is: facial expressions. She has facial expressions. She looks like, and that's something you expect when you talk to a human being. The human being, the words are not it, and not even the written words or even spoken words, but the facial expressions are important. That's why I change, even on Zoom, we see people's faces. It's better than the ones where we only see Shirley or Nancy or Paul's iPad. We don't feel the same link. I read a story once. There is a disease that people get where their face is paralyzed, and there are some people who were therapists, psychotherapists, and they got this illness, and they had to give up being a psychotherapist. No matter how they tried to talk to people just couldn't believe that they were empathizing with them if they couldn't see it in their face. Now that's so that is what Hanson Robotics has been working very hard on. It's not easy physically to create the mechanisms to make the face move and the eyes blink. Probably the eyes blink is easier than the facial expression itself. Now, in terms of conversation, it's really very similar to what we see with the other large language models. Now, they have not created their own model. They have a large language model. They hook into that. They have a lot of scripted answers that she picks. The idea that she really understands anything of what she's saying is, I wouldn't say that she does. I think it's a matter of drawing on scripts that have been given and recombining them in different ways. Whether that's real intelligence or not, Ben does not claim this is artificial general intelligence. He doesn't make that claim. But Sophia's gotten a lot of attention, and that became Hanson Robotics' primary business model, was going around the world and having her speak at conventions and people interact with her and so on. They also have an artwork that she created that they sold. As I mentioned, they managed to sell the digital rights to it for $650,000. So you have the right to say that you own it, despite the fact that it's no different than anybody else's copy, except that it's been certified. That's what's going on in the art market. So it's hype. Whether it's how real it is, one can debate. And let me show another video from Ben where he gets into discussing some of those things. This is, I'm going to start this.
I'm going to ask you some questions that my friend Effie sent me from Switzerland.
That one, I want this one to go.
They still believe that was.
These are longer videos than we have time for, but I'm showing you some of it. And if you want to, you can go to the links and watch them. These are all on YouTube. So,
You know, what I saw in Sophia was a way to, you know, get AI algorithms out there in front of a whole lot of different people in an emotionally compelling way. And part of my thought was really kind of abstract, connected to AGI ethics. And, you know, many people are concerned AGI is going to enslave everybody or turn everybody into computronium to make extra hard drives for their cognitive engine or whatever. And, you know, emotionally, I'm not driven to that sort of paranoia. I'm really just an optimist by nature, but intellectually, I have to assign a non-zero probability to those sorts of nasty outcomes, because if you're making something 10 times as smart as you, how can you know what it's going to do? There's an irreducible uncertainty there, just as my dog can't predict what I'm going to do tomorrow. So it seemed to me that based on our current state of knowledge, the best way to bias the AGIs we create toward benevolence would be to infuse them with love and compassion the way that we do our own children. So you want to interact with AIs in the context of doing compassionate, loving, and beneficial things. And in that way, as your children will learn by doing compassionate, beneficial, loving things alongside you, and that way the AI will learn in practice what it means to be compassionate, beneficial, and loving. It will get a sort of ingrained intuitive sense of this, which it can then abstract in its own way as it gets more and more intelligent. Now, David saw this the same way. That's why he came up with the name Sophia, which means wisdom. So it seemed to me making these like beautiful, loving robots to be rolled out for beneficial applications would be the perfect way to roll out early stage AGI systems so they can learn from people and not just learn factual knowledge, but learn human values and ethics from people while being their home service robots, their education assistants, their nursing robots. So that was the grand vision. Now, if you've ever worked with robots, the reality is quite different, right? Like the first principle is the robot is always broken. I worked with robots in the 90s a bunch when you had to solder them together yourself. And I'd put neural nets doing reinforcement learning on like overturned salad bowl type robots in the 90s when I was a professor. Things, of course, advanced a lot, but
the principle still holds.
Yeah, the principle that the robot's always broken still holds. Yeah. So faced with the reality of making Sophia do stuff, many of my robo AGI aspirations were temporarily cast aside. And I mean, there's just a practical problem of making this robot interact in a meaningful way. Because like, you put nice computer vision on there, but there's always glare. Right. And then, you have a dialogue system, but at the time I was there, like no speech to text algorithm could deal with Hong Kongese people's English accents.
Yeah.
So the speech to text was always bad. So the robot always sounded stupid because it wasn't getting the right text, right? So I started to view that really as what in software engineering you call a walking skeleton, which is maybe the wrong metaphor to use for Sophia, or maybe the right one. But I mean, what a walking skeleton is in software development is, if you're building a complex system, how do you get started? Well, one way is to first build part 1 well, then build part 2 well, then build part 3 well, and so on. Another way is you make like a simple version of the whole system and put something in the place of every part the whole system will need, so that you have a whole system that does something, and then you work on improving each part in the context of that whole integrated system. So that's what we did on a software level in Sophia. We made like a walking skeleton software system where, so there's something that sees, there's something that hears, there's something that moves, there's something that remembers, there's something that learns. You put a simple version of each thing in there and you connect them all together so that the system will do its thing. So there's a lot of AI in there. There's not any AGI in there. I mean, there's computer vision to recognize people's faces, recognize when someone comes in the room and leaves, try to recognize whether two people are together or not. I mean, the dialogue system, it's a mix of like hand-coded rules with deep neural nets that come up with their own responses. And there's some attempt to have a narrative structure,
Right.
and sort of try to pull the conversation into something with a beginning, middle, and end, and this sort of story arc. So it's,
I mean, like if you look at the Loebner Prize and the systems that beat the Turing test currently, they're heavily rule based because, like you had said, narrative structure to create compelling conversations. Neural networks cannot do that well, even with Google Mina. When you actually look at full scale conversations, it's just
this is the thing. So I've actually been running an experiment the last couple of weeks, taking Sophia's chatbot and then Facebook's Transformer chatbot, which they opened the model. We've had them chatting to each other for a number of weeks on the server. Just
that's funny.
We're generating training data
Yeah.
of what Sophia says in a wide variety of conversations. But we can see, compared to Sophia's current chatbot, the Facebook deep neural chatbot comes up with a wider variety of fluent sounding sentences. On the other hand, it rambles like mad. The Sophia chatbot, it's a little more repetitive in the sentence structures it uses. On the other hand, it's able to keep like a conversation arc over a much longer period, right? So now you can probably surmount that using Reformer and like using various other deep neural architectures and to improve the way these transformer models are trained. But in the end, neither one of them really understands what's going on. And I mean, that's the challenge I had with Sophia, is if I were doing a robotics project aimed at AGI, I would want to make like a robo toddler that was just learning about what it was seeing, because then the language is grounded in the experience of the robot. But what Sophia needs to do to be Sophia is talk about sports or the weather or robotics or the conference she's talking at. Like, she needs to be fluent talking about any damn thing in the world, and she doesn't have grounding for all those things. So there's this, just like, I mean, Google Mina and Facebook's chatbot don't have grounding for what they're talking about either. So in a way, the need to speak fluently about things where there's no non-linguistic grounding pushes what you can do for Sophia in the short term a bit away from
AGI. I mean,
Okay, I think I'm gonna stop that at this point.
Sophia.
I don't think Ben is with us yet. If he was, I wouldn't know, I guess. He said he would come on at 1 o'clock, and he's always late, but he always does show up. So I presume that he will be showing up shortly. I could check my email and see if he's there, but I don't, if he sent me a message. No message as yet.
Ted, when he talked about grounding, does that mean the language Sophia speaks, what she can talk about?
No, I think what as I understood what he meant there, he's saying that you have an experience of something and then you can talk about it and deal with it. And that's, you're grounded in something if you know something about it. Now,
Okay,
if you-
okay.
What his idea of creating artificial general intelligence involves starting with a baby. So you develop intelligence as a small child, and you don't know about anything, and you don't have any words at all, and you learn about, you get grounded in physical reality, first of all, and how the physical world works and how you can pick things up. And, you know, so if you think about the first 6 months of life is spent on a lot of that kind of stuff. And then you
Okay.
start talking to people and interacting with things. And, you know, what can you talk to a 3 or 4-year-old about? You know, you can't talk to them about philosophy or something. You know, you have to talk on their level. So that's what I think he means by being grounded.
Okay, thank you.
Now, could you pick that up immediately by loading it into somebody? It's not necessarily the case that a robot would have to develop it that way. What he said, he's talking about the language that Sophia uses. Part of it is from the deep neural nets and the large language models that we're talking about. A lot of it is stuff that is scripted, that they've written with answers to various questions. And that's true, like with chatbots. If a chatbot is in a certain job, it learns to respond to things and to answer those questions. Oh, that's not so different from a human being. You know, if a human being is hired to work for a company, they have to learn to answer questions that customers of that company have and respond to them and so on. So it's going on that way. But that's what he talked about.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? I'm hoping Ben shows up. He always comes on late, but I think he will come up.
So Ted, Ben was talking about Sophia being compassionate, beneficial, and loving. But how
Sophia
much?
said that actually. Ben didn't say that.
Well,
I think,
well,
as I recall.
anyway, how much control does the programmer have over the robot or the AI? Because what we've heard else in other places is that when AI is going off on its own, it creates some negative thoughts, hatred, bigotry, and so forth. What some critics of Elon Musk have said about him and his advocacy of free speech, because free speech is going to be to include hatred and bigotry, and not always compassion, benefit, and love.
Well, those are all difficult questions, and I'm hoping Ben would come out and answer some of them for us. But that is a problem that we saw happen with the original, one of the IBM chatbots, is that a whole bunch of people flooded it with racist comments and taught it to be a racist, and it learned to be a racist, and they took it offline after 2 days because of that. That was an organized effort. But that's a question that Louise raised and the question that she sent. How can you teach a robot to have good values when people don't already agree on what good values are or what they should be? And that's a problem, I think. Now with Sophia, most of it, a lot of it is scripted, and you can limit what it says. And I think that's why the GPT-3 has not been released to the general public. I mean, they are reluctant and scary to release it, that anybody can get on there, because they don't know what people are going to do when they get on there. So that's a real problem. I don't think that problem has been answered as yet. Let me try calling Ben on the cell phone and see if that will help. Hey, Ben? Yeah, I just sent it to you again. I sent it, no, I just sent it on to Gmail to bengertzel@gmail.com. Okay, I reached Ben on the phone and he's going to be coming on, I think. There he is. Connecting to audio.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you. We had some, we've been just watching you on the video talking to Sophia and then an interview talking about Sophia. So people are probably hyped into talk a bit about that. But let me put some of the questions up here on the screen if I can find them. Go ahead, anybody who have a question, go ahead. You don't have to wait for me to put them on the screen. Here are some questions that Louise had. Louise is here today.
Okay.
In class, and you see the questions on your screen, Ben?
Yeah, it's on my phone, so they're small, but I can see them.
I
Yeah,
could
sure.
read them aloud if you like.
I mean, I see them. Yeah, I mean the first question about deep fakes. I mean, this is I think ultimately is not so much an AI problem as a blockchain problem and a problem of the design of information systems. I mean, I think ultimately there will be no way to tell a real photograph from a faked photograph, right? I mean, it's very hard now. It's getting harder and harder, but that doesn't mean that you can't record the history of where a picture came from and tell that way, right? I mean, so from the artifact of just what the picture looks like, you won't be able to tell the difference. But I mean, if your phone records as a encrypted watermark in the image, like where and when the picture was taken, then that can be passed along as the image is transmitted, right? So I mean, I think it will be possible to keep track of the provenance of images to get around the problem of deep fakery, but I don't think it can be done by AI distinguishing deep fakes from real. And I mean that's more about just deep fake images. I mean, about whether
an article is written by a human or an AI. Again, I guess there's no way to tell that, and I'm not sure how much it matters. I mean, you could have a human certify that they wrote it and have them give biometrics or something. But I guess the real issue there is fact checking, like whether the article is written by a human or by an AI, right? And I guess that automating fact checking is interesting and difficult problem, which probably AI can help a lot with, right? I mean, there's increasing information from microphones and security cameras and so forth that is available in principle to feed into an AI to check what really happened. And again, I feel many of the larger issues there are just the organization of like global information infrastructure, right? Like who has access to all the video and audio recordings that are taken around the world to do the fact checking, right? And so I mean you see that with like the war in Ukraine and Russia. Russian media says one thing, Ukraine says another thing. Then we're relying on, videos taken by random people in the battlefield to try to discern what's true or not. Then Russian media says all those were fake videos, right? So I mean, there we have access to footage, and indeed some system of blockchain-based watermarking to show that the footage was really taken in a certain city in Ukraine at a certain time will be helpful. On the other hand, there's probably also security camera footage from all the stores in the Ukrainian cities that had security cameras in the street. That footage is just sitting in some hard drive somewhere, right? Even if the owner of the store would be happy to share it. So, I mean, there's information infrastructure could be improved a lot, and that's probably harder than making the AI work for that, right?
Okay, what about the next questions maybe on who will be held accountable when AIs are running things? Will they have a legal identity? Will they be sued, or would you sue the owner? Or I don't know.
I mean, I think that will be very dynamic as AI evolves, right? I think once you get to AGI that's really smarter than people, and the AGI is running things, then I mean, then the AGI has more power than people anyway. So us holding the AGI accountable is sort of like a young child holding their parent accountable for something. Like the child may blame their parent for something, but they can't do too much about it, which is impactful anyway. And I think ultimately that's where we're heading. But I mean, in the interim, while AIs are still subhuman level in terms of general intelligence, I mean, it seems like in principle the situation is just like any other defective machinery, right? Like who's responsible when the brakes of a car fail or something? So I mean, whoever provided and sold the AI is going to be responsible, and it's going to come down to the end user licensing agreements of the products, right? I mean, the subtler question really is that as deployed AI systems move closer and closer to general intelligence, the people who create the systems just fundamentally have less idea what they're going to do. Like if you train a large language model like a GPT-3 or BERT type model on a large corpus of text, I mean, it's just like sucking in all the text off the web and then responding based on what it learned there. And the people who fed that language learning system, all the language on the web to train that language model, I mean, they don't know how the system is going to answer any particular question. So like we're dealing with that, with
a robot called Grace. It was sort of Sophia Robot's little sister. It was aimed at the elder care space. And I mean, there's a trade-off there we face very concretely between intelligence and controllability, right? Because the way to give the highest intelligence on average is to rely heavily on these large neural models. But then every now and then the robot may say something like completely out there and unacceptable. Like, well, why you look incredibly ugly today? Why are you even alive? And to rule out the robot saying a small percent of totally unacceptable things because of properties of the underlying language model, then you have to, right now, you have to restrict it a lot and filter out the kinds of things it's allowed to say by some templates or something. You're making it a lot less flexible and intelligent, a lot less entertaining to talk to, because you need to restrain it not to cause damage by what it says. I mean, so if I compare that to another application we're doing where we have another humanoid robot from the Hanson family named Desdemona, and she's reciting poetry and singing and performing with a rock band. She's allowed to say any crazy thing she thinks of. So
She write
she's a
her
lot
own
more.
poetry, or does that?
Yeah.
recite-
No, it's AI generated, right? So
Because I guess Louise's next question had to do whether robots can create original art, which could be poetry or painting or whatever.
So she does. The poetry comes out of transformer neural net models that are then enacted through the robot. And the thing is, in that domain, she's allowed to say any crazy thing. It doesn't really matter too much. It's all like in the spirit of improvisation and like jazz music back poetry slam and so forth. So there you can get greater intelligence because you're willing to accept a few crazy things coming out. So I think there's a similar trade-off to in financial trading, right? Like in trading, you can get a higher average return if you're willing to accept higher variance, more volatility in the returns. But if you need very steady returns without a lot of ups and downs, you got to accept lower returns. And the same thing occurs with experimenting with these AI systems. If you need it to be really reliable and never say something that's crazy and unacceptable, then the average intelligence of the thing will be smaller, and the average interestingness will be smaller. And for a healthcare application, you just accept that. I mean, it's not going to be as clever or witty to talk to because of changes you need to make to minimize the totally unacceptable things it says. And so, yeah, for creativity, I mean, no question that AI can come up with highly wild, creative, and entertaining stuff. I mean, we've been experimenting in one of my own projects called Jam Galaxy with AI for making up music and AI for making up poetry that the robot recites together with a band. And I mean, there's a lot of wild, cool, creative stuff. Now the process we go through is, I mean, the AI generates a lot of stuff, and we select from it the stuff that we like most. So I'd say, in a fundamental sense, AI doesn't know why some of what it comes up with is good and why some of it is garbage. On the other hand, you could say some human artists are like that too. They just generate a lot of stuff, and then it's up to the critics or their assistant or something to pick what's actually worthwhile.
How about the painting that you sold the digital token for? Well, that was original work of you.
That was a mix. I mean, so we took photographs and fed them into an AI that then distorted and twisted them around. Then David Hanson, as an artist, touched it up a bit. Then the robot touched it up a bit with a robot hand. So what I would say is, right now, we are at the point where AI is a really interesting tool to use as an artist. So I mean, there's neural net tools called VQGAN, where you you describe in words, like I want, a big green tree with a dragon on it and 13 monsters descending from the sky. And then you can feed it a few pictures as inspiration. And, the AI will generate some really cool looking 3D image. And we've been using this to get images to use in music videos for the band that does the robot poet in it, right? So, I mean, certainly AI is now really cool to use as a sort of creation assistant for humans. I mean, on an everyday routine basis, in the same sense that like Photoshop is a useful tool or something. I'd say right now, while AI can generate interesting stuff a person wouldn't think of, it doesn't have the creative vision that a really great human artist does, but it does have the ability to create cool, original, new artworks that a human wouldn't think of. And of course, how great they are compared to what a human comes up with is subjective. But I mean, if you put them out there, compare with works that humans came up with, I mean, humans will judge the AI's works at least as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure the aesthetic Turing test will be passed for many kinds of visual arts and for song lyrics and a whole bunch of other things. I mean, I still think to really have a creative artistic vision, like to do what the humans are doing who are using the AI tools, will require some breakthroughs toward AGI. But I mean, I think here, just like with game playing, with chess and Go and so forth, the strengths and weaknesses of AI require us to deconstruct what we thought about the human capability that the AI is doing, right? Because I mean, we used to think that playing chess and Go required you to be brilliant in terms of having a high general intelligence. Now we don't think it anymore, right? Now we think, well, yeah, playing chess and Go just requires some special calculating capability. You don't need to be a general intelligence. And then similarly, we used to think that creating really beautiful creative artworks required some brilliant, spiritual, conceptual inspiration from the heart. We now know that it doesn't. I mean, we now know that an AI can create beautiful artworks without any of that, right? And I mean that's so I think we need to rethink so the nature of art and creativity a bit, just as we need to rethink the nature of strategy and thinking in game playing. But still, I would say, like, to invent chess or Go, or to invent jazz music, or come up with the idea of putting beat poetry together with jazz. I mean, there's some, or say invent the 12-tone scale, right? Instead of some other way of chopping up the continuum of sound frequencies. I mean, there's a foundational level of creativity that seems to come out of the general intelligence of human culture that AIs certainly don't have now, but still, at the level of the individual creator, AIs are pretty good, which is interesting and is a lot of fun to work with, actually.
How about the values question? Was the last question that Louise had. How do you guarantee that you're going to get good values in an AGI when people have such different values? Will it get Vladimir Putin's values, or will it get our values, or how will we deal with that?
I don't think you guarantee it. And interestingly, I mean, from a broader sense, if an AI had Putin's values, that would be bad, but it's not like the end of the human race. Like, Putin doesn't want to exterminate all humanity, right? Like, he cares about himself and his kids and his girlfriend and his country. So I mean, in the broad scope of all possible value systems, I mean, Putin is still human, and he actually has the vast majority, the bulk of human values and culture, even though he's now wreaking destruction. So I think there's a big question, which is, if you have a non-human mind and a very non-human body, like how do you encourage it to give a crap about human values whatsoever, right? I mean, and then there's a much smaller question, like once you've gotten it to give a crap about human values at all, how do you tweak it to have one subspecies of human values, like, you know, progressive modern liberal values versus medieval European values versus Putin's values versus the values of a typical Amazonian tribe or something, which are pretty different. And I mean, we have no rigorous theory of values. We have no solid understanding of how to raise or teach humans to maintain certain values. I mean, I think I have some, let's say, non-scientific intuition or feeling that if you raise an AGI the way you try to raise a child and you engage them in beneficial activities with you in a mutual way, so they're doing good things along with you, they're doing medicine, they're doing art, they're doing education, they're doing elder care. If the AGI grows up by doing good things together with humans in a shared way, it will get inculcated with all the patterns of, you know, kindness, compassion, and service. And that seems like the best way to start, but is there a guarantee? You'd have to say there's not a guarantee. And I mean, at this point though, getting into the ethics of making AI smarter and smarter more broadly, I mean, you have to say there's also no guarantee that if we didn't build AGI, humans aren't going to destroy themselves with, you know, bioengineered pandemics or nanotechnology or good old nuclear weapons or something else either, right? So I mean, we've got very few guarantees about our future with or without AGI, and to be honest, not enough data to make a highly accurate, rational projection of the odds of a beneficial outcome from any of these technologies. I mean, I think I'm an optimist. I have a good feeling intuitively or sort of spiritually about what will come out of AGI, which I think will be good. But if I try to put a pure, like, rationalist calculating head on, I have to say the confidence bars are super wide.
Okay, that was the same question that George had, sort of. So I guess we got two questions. Let me show you some of the stuff from the text we've been using from University of Helsinki that gets into the future of AGI. The idea that a super intelligent conscious AGI that can outsmart humans emerges as an unintended result of developing AI methods as naive. The methods are nothing but automated reasoning. To imagine that nearest neighbor classifier linear regression, even
I agree with that. I pretty much agree with that statement. On the other hand, we have projects like my own OpenCog project and like Google DeepMind and loads of OpenAI. There's loads of projects on the planet now that are explicitly trying to create AGI, right? So I mean, I agree. People who are trying to do classification and statistical machine learning, I mean, they're making systems that do that. And I don't think you're going to put a bunch of those systems together and have an autonomous system with its own agency just pop out. On the other hand, could you take components built by people pursuing their AI goals, combine them in a different architecture with an AGI goal in mind to get AGI? That's quite different than what's considered there, right? I mean,
do you think you could give us some idea of what that different architecture would be, or is that too advanced to summarize easily?
Well, I mean, I think at the highest level, the architecture I'm trying to start with for an AGI is just based on human cognitive science. I mean, we're controlling a body in a world. We have different goals on different timeframes, short and long-term goals, including survival, including novelty, including compassion and socialization. Then we have different kinds of memory. I mean, we have episodic memory, declarative memory, sensory memory. We have procedural memory. We have kinds of learning associated with different kinds of memory. I mean, and we're using these different kinds of memory and associated kinds of learning to choose actions that will help us achieve our goals in the world in a fairly open-ended way. Like some of the goals are like just learn new stuff, create new things for the hell of it, right? Just interact with new people and new minds. And I think these sorts of open-ended goals driving exploratory behavior are not what people are aiming at with commercial AI products, right? With commercial AI products, you got some specific thing you want them to do. You want them to do it reliably, so as not to screw your business up. And that's very different than what a toddler or a baby does. Toddlers and babies are not economically very useful because their main goal is to entertain themselves and learn, explore, and build skill, right? So I mean, I think if you start by building a AI toddler in a robot body or in a toddler body in some virtual metaverse world whose main purpose in life is to experience and explore novelty, build stuff for fun and gain understanding. I mean, that's a different sort of thing than building a system to place ads on web pages or reliably put parts of something together in a factory, right? And there's much less effort going into building AI systems whose goal is open exploration and learning because it's research. Like there's not direct economic value in it. I mean, just like no one would spend time with a baby or toddler unless they had a strong level of confidence it was going to grow up into something else, right?
Okay.
I think I'm gonna have to go, Ted. Speaking of babies and toddlers, I have to pick your grandson up at preschool.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, and I'll try to answer your questions and channel what you might have said, which is probably not very accurate.
I'm sure you have a perfectly good biological neural net model of my responses, right? All right, bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Well, he did show up on his phone. I think he gave us I didn't ask him to reserve an hour or anything.
So Ted, do you think Ben can get a robot to pick up his son from preschool?
Well, you know that you get the idea of a robot that can do all kinds of things, like a robot that could drive a car and also write a novel, sit down at a computer and type it and play music and so on. And what you get in AI is different devices that do the things. I think you could get a robotic car that would drive to the school, and if somebody at the school put the kid in the car and strapped him in, it could drive him home. I think there's no humanoid robot driving the car, but I do think that's possible, and it's not that far off, really. That's not that is something that tremendous amount of resources are being spent developing the software. Now, if you'll also have a robot that'll go into the school and ask for the kid and so on, I guess you could do that, I suppose.
I just worry about the human aspect of it. I mean, you pick up your child because you love him, not because a car will pick him up and deliver him. It just kind of gives me an uneasy feeling, I guess. Where's the love and the connection?
BBC series, you know, what if the entrepreneur sends his chauffeur to pick up his kid? So it's an employee who doesn't really give shit about the kid. It's just his job. You know, that's not Ben. Ben is very much into human relationship with his kids and spends a lot of time with them. And, you know, so I'm sure he would agree with you on that. But
yeah, I know he's fascinating. I would just love to see to have seen him as a 6-year-old. What was he like growing up? Was he real adventuresome? And
Well, he was very intellectual and very curious and wanting to know all kinds of things, and spent a lot of time with books and records and so on. So he was very interested in the world and trying to figure things out.
he's just fascinating. I love to hear him talk. He's just amazing.
He's very popular as a speaker, and a lot of people come to hear him. You know, he could make a very good living just giving speeches at conventions of businessmen and so on. He gets like $25,000 when he goes to one of those for a couple days.
Oh my goodness.
So it's
That's
but he
fantastic.
doesn't want to spend his time doing that. He wants to be doing research and stuff. You know, he's not orienting his life to maximize his income, although his income he's done pretty well recently, but with this.
Oh, I bet, Ted. How about his company? Is his company called Hanson
Hanson
something?
Robotics is not his company. He works for them. David Hanson's the guy who created that. His job has to do with the language models and getting it to converse and so on. He's not a robotics person in terms of developing the robotic machinery. David Hanson is an artist, and he's a very interesting guy too. There's a lot of interesting guys working on these things, not just Ben. Ben is more of a speaker than a lot of them and so on, but
okay.
He has several companies and organizations, and they're into the cyber-currency, what do you call it, the model. They have their own cryptocurrency actually that they created for their model, and you can make a lot of money. And I don't know, like my son-in-law who came from Ethiopia, had to leave because of the politics there. He made a whole lot of money speculating just in cryptocurrencies, but I'm afraid you could lose it all very quickly too, I think. But Ben is not primarily oriented towards income, accumulating money. That's not his primary interest in life.
What was his education, Ted? What was Ben's education?
He went to public schools, and we lived in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Then when my wife and I split up, she moved to Haddon Heights, we went to Haddonfield because they had what they called a continuous progress program where you could work on your own, but it didn't really come to much. He left high school after 10th grade, and he found a place to go, which was an early college, Simon's Rock at Bard College up in Massachusetts. Yeah. It's affiliated with Bard College, but it's not the main Bard campus. Okay. It's in Great Barrington.
We have a daughter that went to Bard.
But Simon's Rock is affiliated with Bard, but it's separate. It's in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So he went to college there, and then he went to graduate school at NYU, and then he switched to Temple. He always wanted to pursue his own interest. Well, he got a doctorate in mathematics, his degrees in math. And he got a job teaching math in University of Nevada, Las Vegas, but then he got a job in New Zealand. He always wanted to do the computer stuff. This computer stuff with AI was was not a hot field at the time, and it was hard to get jobs in it. And it is sort of tanked. That's something I didn't get into that I would have gotten into if we had been. If Ben hadn't showed up, I had my alternative materials. But there's been this secular thing in AI, what we call the AI winners, and it's taking off and it's dying. Let me just show you this graph. This is what we call the AI winters. AI started more in the 1960s. It was a boom, then it busted. And what happened is they made all kind of predictions of how they were gonna come out with truly intelligent AI in 8 or 10 years, and doing this just with rule-based programming. when it didn't happen, it sort of collapsed. And the neural nets thing came along. People projected too much. So you have these periods when it's down. Right now it's swinging up. Whether it's going to shoot up and become tremendously popular, or whether the bubble's going to burst and people are going to say, well, that's not really working too well, or somewhere in between. I mean, it's been cyclical. So Ben's career sort of is, you know, when it was in these winters, it was harder to find work and so on. And then when it takes off, all of a sudden he's in hot demand. And he had a company called WebMind that he started in New York, and he got funding from a guy who was had been a finance capitalist working for banks, and that collapsed. I mean, he went out of business. His company went broke. He's had an up and down career in terms of success, and I think because he was promising more than he was able to deliver. He thought it was going to be easier than it was. He's certainly more cautious about making predictions like that now. I think he's got a lot more. There have been several times when I've had to bail him out financially. It's not like he's always been zooming ahead. He always found another job. Probably had to bail him out because of his divorce, and he ran up a large lawyer bill. And fortunately, my second wife paid it off. Even though we were divorced, she just wrote a check for $50,000 to his lawyer.
Is he in Hong Kong? It says
No, he's living on Vashon Island, near across in Puget Sound, near Tacoma,
Yeah,
and Seattle.
where that is. I know where that is. Yeah.
Yeah, he came to Vashon. I was discussing this, I think maybe before you logged on as somebody. He came to Vashon mostly just for a visit with his wife's Chinese, so she has to have a visa to come. It's a bit of a problem. And then the COVID came, and they really couldn't go back to Hong Kong without going into, you have to go into, what do you call it, quarantine for 2 weeks. And then if she leaves the country now, she's waiting to get a green card so she could be a citizen or been able to leave the country and come back. She couldn't leave. He goes places. He went to Saudi Arabia to a conference, brought COVID back with his family. Now my daughter got it too, and her husband and my granddaughter and my ex-wife and her. My ex-wife became a lesbian and left me for a woman who she's still with. We've had a long family history, which don't need to go into, but they both got COVID now, but they didn't get much of any symptoms. My daughter's got their testing positive. Fortunately, they're all vaccinated. None of them are anti-vaxxers, which has had a great effect in terms of making it a moderate disease rather than a life-threatening illness.
So Ted, when Ben was posing these questions to Sophia, he posed them in a very conversational way. He didn't have a succinct question he was presenting. He did it in a conversational, contextual way. How much do you think Sophia was processing of what he said?
Well, she understood the words, and it's like these large language models we've been looking at. You're looking at what have other people said in response to these kind of words. You train the model to answer specific kinds of questions. So you start with a broad model, the large language model, but you need to know how to structure sentences and to talk coherently. And then you feed it with the specifics of the domain that you're concerned with. So Sophia is trained to answer those kind of questions and has the answers there. Whether she understands them in some way is maybe that's a philosophical question. What is understanding? She certainly don't have the kind of understanding that we have. She doesn't have self-concept and so on. And she breaks all the time. Usually she is broken, as Ben said in that discussion. They shipped her out to the. I went to this art exhibit in in Miami because she had made the art, or another one of the robots, and they trying to sell robotic art and getting it up and running. And of course, you ship it through as freight, and then one of the suitcases doesn't come through, and it comes through late. You know, you have all kinds of practical problems like that dealing with robots. And that's why a lot of the people who are working on the AI they like to work within games, within virtual worlds. And they get the robot to carry on a conversation within a virtual world, because from the conversational part, having the body there is not critical. You know, you could be talking to somebody and they would be an image. They could be on virtual reality. And I think there's a tendency to want to move more to that sort of thing, and to get it to play games and so on, which is a hard technical problem in and of itself, to play the kind of computer games that kids play with, game boxes and all that sort of stuff, which I don't really know much about, but but those robots are trained to do that. Now, you couldn't take Sophia and have it play games. It's not trained to do that. You might be able to talk about it a bit, but that's true of most of us. If we go to play a game like that, we would be lousy at it. You'd have to practice. You have to learn the specifics of the domain you're dealing with. So Sophia carries on good conversations on those topics. Probably not so much if you want to talk about the congressional election in Ohio yesterday or something. I mean, it doesn't follow that probably.
What do you think Sophia would say in response to what is your view on abortion?
I couldn't tell you that. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Do you think that she would understand sarcasm? Like, you can say words that sound nice, but it's your tone of voice that makes it be derogatory?
Those would have been great questions to ask Ben. I'm afraid I can't answer it. I don't know. I would guess not, but I'm not certain. No, they could be trained to do that. Some of the other things I was going to show you, like medical diagnosis software, we have this software where you just type things in. But they have one that listens to your tone of voice and how you're speaking. And so they can train a computer to pay attention to your tone and how well you're speaking and how you look. Even the one that I did show you, I think that the GI hospitals have, to try to see whether somebody really looks anxious or really looks upset. And so a computer can be trained to do that. I'm not sure that Sophia has been trained to do that. And of course, if it was learning to speak in Chinese, the whole language is tones. We don't use tones that much in English. Although we do, like you can have a questioning tone or an angry tone. I mean, there are tonal differences in English that the computer could pick up. So there's certainly the technology is there to understand tone of voice. I think this is our last class, so we're sort of finished. I'm not thinking of doing another one like this. Helsinki has another class that follows this that really goes over a lot of the same stuff, but at a higher level. It requires some knowledge of a programming language and stuff. But that's I'm not going to do that with ILR certainly. So this will be the end of our classes, and at the end of all of the ILR classes, I don't think we're offering anything in the summer. We didn't traditionally offer summer classes. We did during the COVID at one time as a temporary thing, but we're not at this point. So I have not heard anything about our classes for the fall either. I don't know what we're offering, so I can't share that with you at this point. Maybe George, are you still on the board of of, we're gonna have a board meeting pretty soon, so we'll know about that.
Isn't there a new program director coming on in the fall?
Well, Martha's term is over. And according to the rules, she's not supposed to continue more than 3 years, but I don't know that we have anybody wanting to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know who will be program director or whatever. That's really the important job, that putting the program together and finding people to teach the classes. I will
Yeah,
say this, I am on the board, I guess. I'm not a voting member. I'm just the webmaster, actually. I wasn't elected, which doesn't really matter. We never have votes, but if you have any suggestions, ideas for courses you'd like to have, and particularly if you have ideas of people who would be good to teach the courses. One of the problems is we get suggestions from people, we don't have anybody to teach the things, but you can send them to me and I'll be glad to share them with the board. I'm thinking I might do one on visions of the future, which is, I've done some of that before, but we've got new people and I could integrate some new ones. I haven't decided whether I want to propose that or not. Anybody have any other last comments, questions?
I just want to say thanks, Ted. You are just such a good teacher, and
Well,
the
thank you.
Zoom allows, us to do these classes, and a lot of people who can't come to the classes can do it on Zoom.
Well, that raises a question of whether we're really going to continue the Zoom classes or not, or whether people want Zoom classes after COVID. I mean, we started Zoom because of COVID, and I don't know. I sort of think most retired people are home a lot and they'd like to go out and have a social experience and so on. So the social experience is part of it. Of course, now Paul is off in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so if we're not on Zoom, we'll certainly lose him. But
Yeah, and I talked to a couple people who would have been on Zoom. I don't know why they didn't, but anyway, I think it's a good idea to have both. But I don't know how you do that, the logistics.
I could teach a class and have it on Zoom and also give it in the classroom, I would think. I don't see why I couldn't.
Yeah.
They're the kind of class where people divide up into discussion groups and stuff. Classes like that, it's harder to work. You can have a discussion group on Zoom for the people who are on Zoom.
Yeah.
It sort of becomes two different classes.
Yeah.
I thought with this class, particularly as related to the computer stuff, it's good to be on the computer, but.
Yeah.
I just want to echo Betty's comments, Ted. I thought you did a great job in organizing and researching the course. So I appreciate all the work you did. I think others do too.
Yep, thank you very much, Ted.
I do
I thought this
appreciate
was an
This was a small class. There was not as much interest as the other classes, I think, so. I'm not sure. Some of the other classes are pretty technical, the one on biology and stuff, so I don't think it's necessarily that. Maybe I'll see some of you tomorrow at the class on exoplanets. I don't know. I'm still signed up for that. And we have Friday, we have the last class of Jim Moon's Eastern European class. So and then we're off for the summer.
They've been excellent classes.
Well,
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ted. It's been enlightening.
all right. Well, keep in touch. And I hope to see you people one place or another further along. Paul, I got my bike fixed, so I'm riding again. Anytime you come down.
Good.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I look forward to that, Ted, because it gives me a good workout trying to keep up with you, when you're battery powered.
I have a battery and he's manual, so he can't keep up with me, but what the heck? It's not really fair that way when you have the electric assist and he doesn't.
Yeah, downhill I can do just fine. Anyway, appreciate it, Ted. Great class. Thanks.
See you,
Thanks.
see you sometime.
Thanks
Bye-bye,
again.
everybody.
See you.
Bye-bye.